always want to make sure that if you're buying a single vineyard bottle, it's not, you shouldn't be disappointed. I like to think that each of our wines will be of value at the price that it's at, and that they will compete with other wines that are more expensive.
Okay, and no arguments here. Yeah, absolutely. Nice. All right, so interesting thing about this wine is we did it on the show already, right? Out of a 375, and we did it on a blind show. And
if I could delete one show we've ever done, it would be that show.
Really?
Oh yeah, totally. Which one would you take back?
The first episode 1, because it was horrible. I can't even watch it. I make
George Lucas feels the same.
Sick burn.
Nice. But this is a wine, like we were talking about, how his wines open up over time. This is a wine that he made to age. It even says so on the bottle that we drank it. We popped and poured it right on release, blind, which is like probably the worst possible format for thinking about the story. But now we're coming back to it. Over a year later, around 2 years later.
2 years later.
Yeah, 2 years
later.
later.
It was early, yeah.
So
it was right on release that we tried this, so.
So it's fun. In 2008, talking about big press again, right? Just like they did it on 2007, they loved 2008. What did you think of 2008 for the story?
Well, it's funny. There's two different thoughts in that. If you look at 07 and 08 sort of next to each other, the difference is not the way that you would think. The press is basically an amplifier, and it I don't want to say blows things out of proportion, but it's a megaphone. And so 2007 is not as bad a vintage as people say, and 2008 maybe not be a great vintage. I shouldn't say that, but it's not the difference. Like when you put the wines next to each other, they're obviously Matello, whether it's 07 or 08.
They're just different.
Right, exactly. And it's neither, they're both good, and they both show this one's really is set up to show the signature of the cellar.
Okay.
And it's picked basically on the barrels that I like the best, which is definitely going in, and it's seeing a vertical of it, like there's a certain consistency within that isn't really necessarily the best wine that we make, but it's the one that I like the best, and that shows. 08 Suri to me is one of those things that I really do. I love the vintage, I love the wine, but it's not something that's for here and now. One of the things that's always stayed with me is Jacques Lardier from Maison Jetto. This is one of those things that only the French can say. And he says, you know, we can make these wines so they're more accessible. We can have them so that they're ready to drink now. It's like, but I taste the wines from the 30s and the 40s and the 50s, and if we didn't have this tannin and acid and extract, they wouldn't be what they are. And no one but the French can taste the wines from the 30s, the 40s, and the 50s.
Hopefully someday.
Yeah, hopefully someday. And that's the thing, is that I think at some point you have to commit to a wine that you like now, but that 20 years from now, it still has to have your back.
And I think it's, especially for a guy that's like newer to the business, right, that isn't coming into it after retiring from a career in medicine or something like that, right, like making, like making a wine that isn't ready to rock out of the gate is a risk and a leap and a commitment, like to vision, and it's really exciting to see people doing that, because like you say, if nobody does, that evidence just isn't there, right, for people to see. And for people to experience that, man, Oregon wines can age, and the guys who did this early made the right decisions, and you know, it's a document, right, of what was going on.
Single biggest thing I learned from David Lett, and I had the luxury of tasting older vintages with him, and I had the luxury of meeting him because I started at West Street down the street, and David was at Iowa 2 blocks away, and Amy Wesselman was David's assistant winemaker. So he would come down and visit, and I learned that, one, he's a remarkable individual just for his wit and his intelligence, but he's maybe the most stubborn person I've ever met. This is someone who was stubborn enough to plant Pinot Noir in Oregon, to plant Pinot Gris for the first time in the country, and then he was stubborn enough never to change what he did, whether big fruited wines were becoming the rage. It didn't matter. He didn't ever. Irie is Irie, and 40 years later, you have that ability to taste something like those old wines are great.
Yeah, and then you talk about something
that really is amazing.
From being a document, like he's created a monument, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so to some extent, I prefer to think of myself as having that influence is established not on the 99% of wines that are bought and drank right away. It's the 1% that are open 10 years later. And then those are the wines that when you say, where does Oregon belong in terms of Burgundy, California, anywhere else as a wine producing region, it will be on how well those wines show. So you have to produce those wines, even if it means that you struggle early on.
Take a bit of a risk early on. Awesome. Wow. And so in that case, this wine is an example of that, because when we tasted it early on, I mean, granted we tasted it in the worst possible setting, but the high acid, high structure was detrimental to it early on. But now, where are we at?
I would love to tell everybody who sees this that every time you open a bottle of Matello, you will love the wine. It will absolutely get out there and show you what it's got. I make Pinot Noir, so that's not true.
Yes.
Realistically, you're going to open a cork and my wines will look at you and be like, not now. Why did you do that?
It's
and
true.
That's really what's going on.
That does happen, right? Yeah.
Pinot Noir is the grape where you go to the mountain, not the other way around. And that's what, in some ways, I think makes it so attractive, because to some extent, once you hit that point where you can open and you can follow the grape correctly, you realize that you're in a very small select group, to some extent.
Right.
I don't think that Pinot should be exclusive, but at the same time, you do have to learn it.
You absolutely have to learn it. That's a great.
And more so, and in my mind, it's not like you won't have fun if you don't, but it rewards the effort.
Yeah.
Right. Like there's plenty of Pinot
really
Noir that you can enjoy from day one, but just like a lot of more complex music, like a lot of paintings, right? Like the more time you spend learning about it, the more you get out of every experience that follows.
I was in band for 6 years in high school, and previous to that, I was in high school for 6 years. But I would say that I enjoyed the heck out of the first years as much as the last years. My neighbors might not have, but it is that it's like the early, have fun with muddling around, and if you open something and it doesn't show, just relax, wait 20 minutes, see if it's better. If it's not, pull the cork on something else. You know, I mean, that's the thing, have fun with it, but then kind of look at it and say, what should I have done?
You'll learn from it. Totally.
And hopefully people will have that older Pinot Noir that shows them why it's worth waiting.
Yeah. We've been lucky enough to have this experience. So anyway.
The nose here is definitely changed from the last time we tried it. I distinctly remember it being kind of stinky that time, and that I'm not getting any of right now. I'm getting a lot more of just like black earth.
It was a little sweaty almost early on.
That's great to hear you say that, because I felt that was one of the most self-conscious remarks that I've
It was almost like, I don't want to say locker room, but it was kind of like, what's going on?
Yeah, and that's totally not in play at all right now.
So now I'm getting a little bit of like the processed fig thing going on, like fig Newtons, the interior of it, just a little bit of that like richness and sweetness alongside the like cherries and the other red fruits that are going on.
Like red hibiscus.
But we're talking like darkness here. Yeah, it's darker and richer and sweeter. It smells good though. I do agree with the hibiscus. There's like a green component, like a green herbal component. Just a little bit. Oh, sorry. It's okay. Wow. It's all right. Red tea. Red tea. There we go. Yes.
There is a little green, savory component to me, and that's something early on from the Burgundies that I would like to drink. I would find strawberry, I would find earth, I would find a lot of things, but there was oftentimes a little mint.
Okay.
And that mint to me was sort of a high tone counterbalance. It's in the same way we're talking
I do
about.
like that. Yeah.
When you have music, you can have a single instrument or you can have 4 instruments playing in harmony. And when you have the harmony, I think that's where the complexity of Pinot Noir comes. It can be both high-toned and at the same time the bass notes with it. It's fun to me that this is very red fruit with a little darkness, and then right now the cerise seems like dark with a little bit of redness.
Yes. But I do agree with what you were saying earlier about you have multiple tones going on in the same expression. Like the herbal components can go along with like a sense of like richness or whatever, and provide more complexity. And for me, like you get the main component, I get like rosemary regularly.
Sure.
Because maybe because I'm around mint less and around more rosemary a lot more being in Oregon.
Oregon, I get more rosemary out of our almonds. And maybe I'm not a proponent of the idea that it grows here, so therefore, but I think that with Burgundy, I get the mint. Oregon ones, I feel rosemary. rosemary's really the wrong one to lean in that.
Oh,
Maybe
nice.
it's a little oregano, but it bounces, but definitely.
It just seems to be everywhere here, and so like you get enough influence of that, and it tends to stick in your brain, and you catch it more often. So, man, this has changed dramatically again.
The structure here is still very big, I think, and definitely to the point where I'd say, like, if you've got these, no rush, right? Like, if I had a couple bottles of this, I wouldn't be looking to open one next week. I'd still want to sit on it for a while. What I haven't seen so much, what I didn't see before, there's a really nice core of fruit, but it's kind of like, you know, your kid, you're playing in the backyard with a tennis ball or something like that, and you throw it and it rolls into a big bush, right? There's just like this really nice strawberry fruit that's kind of enveloped by a full structure of acidity and tannins, and while it's not fierce, and I remember before I felt it was pretty rough and kind of distracting, and I got a hard time with it. It's not so much that way, it's got a lot more poise now, but it's still kind of like surrounding the fruit, and it makes me excited for what it's going to become in the future.
Interesting thing about the wine on the palate here is that like, the darkness that I'm getting on the nose is not immediately what I'm tasting on the palate. There's a little bit of that dark fruit flavor, but as it goes into the mid palate and finish, it's like red fruit, more red fruit, and then this is more at least looking back on my previous note, this is far more integrated. At least even when we opened this earlier.
I would agree with that.
What a change! Like before, I was struggling with the acidity. I'm like, wow, again, just still high acidity. It's over the top of the fruit for me, not completely integrated. Like there is more integration now that we've given it probably about an hour and tasted this now. The structure is still very firm, but the intensity of the flavor is there with it. Like it's balanced, but it's like all the way up here. Is that a characteristic of 08? I mean,
Yeah,
as
I
far
would
as
say
like
so.
Flavor intensity and concentration and tannic structure.
Away is a dense vintage. I mean, dense, not necessarily weighty, but it's an intense vintage across the board. You have a lot of everything. Small clusters, smaller berries, very intense fruit, really beautiful late ripening. And so alcohols they're full, but not over the top. And this is, to me, it's funny. I mean, I felt that this was one of those wines that tasting it when we opened it, it's like, it shows quality, but we're early. We need another couple of years.
Correct.
And now it's like, if it's an hour later, I still feel like, well, it needs a couple of years, but I'm also at this point thinking,
This is drinking
in another hour, it might be really good.
Yeah, this is tasty.
So
Yeah.
after the camera's off,
yeah. But wow, it's a significant change from previous. Like this is something like you need to age this, and this is one I would seek out to age. If you're going to open one now, decant it totally. But this is something based on the previous experience with the 07, and this is a fuller vintage that's more in balance now, or it's in balance now and should continue to age gracefully. Yeah, I wouldn't open another bottle for, what, 3 years?
I would say, yeah.
Yeah, 3 years probably. I mean, and I'm excited. I'm really excited for the potential of this wine. So, awesome. And big thanks for allowing us to taste it.
Totally.
Oh, my
Yeah,
gosh.
it's pretty amazing. So,
Moving on to wine number 5, final wine, done with the Pinot Noir. You should tell us a little bit about
tell us a little about Syrah in the Willamette Valley, because that's not something we hear much about.
No. So, one of my wineries that I very much look up to is Crystal. Steve Dorner, the winemaker there, makes some fantastic Pinot Noir. Certainly our whole cluster regimen is something that came from my enjoying their wines. And I was tasting with Steve in 2006. We were tasting 3 barrels of Pinot Noir, and we ended with, they had estate Syrah from Yosemite in barrel from 04 and 05, and when I tasted them, they reminded me of the Northern Rhone to a degree that was remarkable. Very unlike the average New World Syrah.
Right.
Much more.
Or Southern Rhone Syrah.
Right. Even not
Not
like
there.
you would find in Shetland. It was very distinct in terms of the things that you find in the Northern Rhone. And I love those ones. So I immediately started looking to find a little bit of Syrah. There's only a few people that have it planted in the valley, but it is actually, I wouldn't say it's up and coming, but there's more of it out there than I think people realize. This is from a vineyard called Dubert. It's planted by Mike Green in the mid-90s, 94 and 95.
Okay.
It's fermented. I love traditional winemaking methods. My feeling is that modern culture prizes efficiency, older culture prizes quality. Back in the day, 200 years ago, you were making wine for your village. You were making wine for 25 miles away. You didn't have very much to live on. You didn't have, college tuition or any of that stuff to work.
Big bills.
Right.
Yeah.
So you were making the best wine possible. Most of the technological advances, there is some quality involved, but a lot of it is convenience. And so this wine is very much a throwback. It has a percentage of Viognier, which is very traditional in the northern Rhone. It's 100% whole cluster. There's no de-stemming. It's foot dreaded for the first week.
Wow.
We do punch downs by hand after that. There's no yeast inoculation. There's no cold soaks. There's no enzymes. It's just it's
let it go
in a bin. Yeah.
I didn't know that. Wow, that's great.
Yeah, that's remarkable when you let that happen. Yeah, it's wow.
I hear a lot of excitement, and when I say press, I'm not like national press. I'm like local retailers and restaurants really like to talk about this wine when it comes out. They're like, oh, we got the Fool's Journey. Check it out. I didn't know there was like all those details behind it. That's pretty interesting.
It's fun because I think that's the thing that there's a back of the brain connection for us with wine and with the aromatics and the smells and with things that have personality. And I think this wine connects with that, with people, with the feeling of an older time where things were handcrafted and where things were simpler in some ways. And it's handled that way. I mean, it even finishes out. There's no new wood on this wine. It's just really what you have in the vineyard and kind of translated via the yeast into the barrels and then into the bottle. And it shows terroir as much as anything. I think that, Pinot Noir is the king of terroir.
Okay.
Like, I love Nebbiolo, and I look at it and I'm like, well, why is Pinot Noir better than Nebbiolo? And I can't really come up with an answer other than Pinot Noir is more diverse than any other grape. When you go vineyard to vineyard to vineyard to vineyard, Pinot Noir can have so many different expressions. Not better.
I
just
agree.
different.
Just different. Yeah.
And the Syrah, though, this is just a wine that there's nothing, it's very little here that's changed. It's just the essence of the vineyard. So, and it's nice because it's not about the cellar. It really is, we get that feeling in here of doing the same thing that somebody did 500, 800, 1,000 years ago.
That's remarkable to think about. Yeah.
10 millennia ago, there was some guy dumping Syrah and Viognier grapes into a big, whatever it was, probably wooden fermenter at the time.
Right.
And then he jumped in and he stomped the grapes down and the juice fermented. And at the end of the day, they were drinking something not dissimilar from this.
Wow, awesome. And the aromatics of this wine just, even being in a place where we're aging, we got wine aging around us and it's cool, the wine is jumping out of the glass. Like there is amazing aromatics.
Has also changed. Now it's easily been an hour since this was originally opened. The complexity coming out of the nose is nothing short of magnificent right now. This is just great Syrah character. Like the dark fruits, a little bit of blackberry, and just lots of earth. And not like the wet forest floor or like black earth that you get out of Pinot Noir. It's a little drier, but it's still got this good weight to it without being overwhelming.
Man, what is that? It's just the dark fruit flavors here paired with something else, and it's like it's adding more to it. It's like the only thing I can think of is like it's almost like a bloody component.
Oh,
like
yeah, sure.
Like a uncooked beef while it's still bleeding out on a plate, that sort of thing. Like behind this like rich black fruit, and it's just awesome. Yeah. It smells fantastic. And then the herbal thing we've talked about, I think, in the past bottles, is like there is just a touch of like maybe a green rosemary or maybe like a basil or something going on there too. But man, that rich dark fruit's impossible to get away from. Like it's awesome.
It has that nice, I think of it almost that it's like a complete meal in a glass. You have that black
Yes.
beef, you have the fruit, but you also have the savory herb. this is still light in the mouth.
Totally.
There's richness of texture, but there's none of the heaviness of alcohol. There's none of the coffee, and I like coffee, don't get me wrong, but I mean, it's weightless power.
Velvet Club and Iron Fist. Before, yes. I've used that in a Chateauneuf too. I've used that in a tasting note before for a Chateauneuf wine. That's the only reason why we were saying it. I was like trying to use the same expression. Yeah, basically, that's where you're going. So, and this is totally that. I would say I don't know that I've honestly ever had. I don't know that I've honestly ever had Willamette Valley Syrah before. Have you before this, or have you had this bottling before this?
I've had full
first time.
I mean, last weekend actually. I had the 2010.
Okay.
The 2010.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure I've had other ones in the past too. But
Yeah, I think this is the first time I've ever had a Willamette Valley Syrah, and mind blowing as to where what's possible, I guess is what I want to say. So, wow.
yeah, great stuff. I really like how when it sets into the palate, there's a bright red fruit character that hits right away. I think I'm going to go for strawberry. It's not super distinct strawberry, but just like bright, flavorful red fruit. And then these dark components kind of wash back across the palate while the red fruit stays in the front. And I really like that complexity.
We were talking about there's power here without weight, and it's not the lower alcohol allows more of the flavors to come forward and express themselves, and there is complexity here that you don't get in like more powerful high alcohol wines. And Syrah like this is not typical, right? Like you typically see Syrah from either California, Washington, or from Chateauneuf du Pape, and it's 14%, 14.5, depending on the vintage. This is, and one thing I'm seeing, some producers are doing it, like Faust Peace doing it, some of the stuff out of Yakima Valley, doing the lower alcohol expression of Syrah, and it's just completely different than what I'm used to, and but so well done and very interesting and delicious. So
This wine to me is one of those things that really, I think every winemaker deep down wants to know that they're working in a place that's special. That what they have isn't about them, but that they have the opportunity to sort of shepherd something unique and special. And that the place that they live and work is that way. And I think Pinot Noir is one of those things that there's no question that the Willamette Valley does Pinot Noir incredibly well. But I think that when you look at them across the border and say, this is what Syrah is here as well, you realize how special this place is. And again, there's so few places in the world that could actually produce both of those types of wines.
right?
And then this is something where you can, all of the Syrah from Yakima, I've had some really beautiful things. And this is just a completely different expression. And again, not better. I love the individuality, the ability to sort of look across the river at your neighbor and be like, hey, how you doing? And at the same time know that there will be a stamp that's Oregon and then there's a stamp that's Washington.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I'm getting like a nice nutmeg flavor, kind of in the mid-palate as I keep drinking this, and the acidity here is fantastic. We talked about limes kind of in regard to some other wines in the past. I think the acidity really has a little bit of lime character, but that dark fruit on the finish, a little bit of earthy character, a little bit of gamey, kind of like meaty character definitely lingers across the palate, but the acidity keeps things so clean and light. That sip after sip, this just remains compelling. Really enjoy it.
And for me, right on the upper end of what I like in acidity. Like we're pushing it, but the fruit here is so compelling, and the rest of the wine is so interesting that the strength of the acidity doesn't play into it. So yes. So you guys know, some of the viewers know my levels on acidity.
Totally. Yeah.
Like this is right at the upper level of that, and people that like higher acidity Syrahs, this is going to be right up your alley, as Dan said. So.
And same thing that I would say with the other ones. It's two of my favorite producers in Rhone, Alondreo, and I'm going to blank on the other one right now.
That's all right.
Go back to one of my favorite producers in Rhone is Alondreo, and his wines always on release have really bright, fresh acidity that's almost, again, even for me, on that upper level. But 10 years in, those wines are unbelievable.
Right.
And that's
the reason.
This is, I think, showing really well today, but if you can hold on to it, it's not going anywhere.
What's the potential for something like this? Yeah, it's.
I think that's what's, for me, it's a new thing. I guess that's almost the other thing that could this is the first time tasting one in the Valley Straw for you, and for me, it's like, this is such a new toy, and it's such a good toy. It's just like, okay.
Well, you ended up with some
How
really
can you stop?
quality
Yeah,
product.
yeah.
No doubt. So,
I think
wow.
I'll have as much fun watching how this, changes over the next 10 years, but it's a wine that gives you faith that it'll be there.
Totally. Based on all the components and elements of this wine, absolutely.
So that's 5 wines, and
Yeah.
normally we do a little bit of discussion afterward, but we've spent 2 episodes worth of time talking about the wines.
It's been long.
I imagine you don't mind, because that's what we're here to talk about. That's what you're here to watch. That's all good. But we're going to wrap things up the way we always do. Question of the day. What sort of question would you like to ask people who watch the show?
Question for the people who watch the show is Ben Roethlisberger going to be back for the playoffs?
Great question.
We're going to get one comment.
I don't know, maybe we got some other NFL fans out there. We'll see.
Yes, we will.
Thanks so much for watching. Thanks to Marcus for coming out. This is a great
Thank you
time.
very much. This is
Look forward to having you back in the future, and we'll see you guys next time.
Bye, Internet.